Welcome back to the PFF NFL Show. Trevor Sikkema, Dalton Wasserman, here with you guys once again for another fun off-season topic, a classic, if you will, something that Sam and Steve did for many years that we know you guys love. We're trying to pick it up, we're trying to do it, and put our own little spin on it. It's reasons for optimism for all 32 teams in the NFL. Dalton, this was your honor of doing this article and actually coming up with these points for every single team. How did it feel? As somebody who, right before we hit record, you were like, oh, man, I guess I got to be nice to every single team. How did it feel knowing that you had to say something nice about every single team in the NFL?
It is weird, and even our editor has said that to me. They go, you know what, Dalton, sometimes you're kind of a grouch. You got this Larry David kind of attitude. You're a Jet fan, so everything's always this dark view of the world. So, we need you to exercise just a little bit. Just be a litlittle brighter about things. See things a little more optimistically. It's the right time of year for it. Once we get to the end of September, then we start tearing things apart, of course, because that's when everyone panics after a team's first 3 games. But, they're like, I think this felt like more, choosing me for this was more an exercise of like, okay, I have to be more optimistic, even more so than getting views on an article or a video. This feels almost like a personal attack, but we took it on, and I think we at least did a decent job with it.
This is an HR assignment. This wasn't an editorial assignment. This is maybe punishment. You may have done something wrong earlier in the offseason. Maybe you misspelled too many words, and they're like, all right, that's it. Make them be nice. Make them be nice for all 32 teams. Make them write the article. And on top of that, let's do the show about it. Appreciate everybody rocking with us. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, we would love for you to do so. We're around all offseason, getting you guys ready for the 2025 NFL season. If you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, as we go through this entire show, you can see all those numbers for yourself and beyond. If you're a fantasy football player, if you're into the NFL draft, a PFF Plus subscription has you covered with all the data, all the context, all the information you could want to be a smarter football fan and power winning decisions, as we say around here. Again, whether it's in fantasy football, whether it's what your team is doing, whether it's betting, no matter what. If you don't have that PFF Plus subscription, now's a great time to get one. Dalton, let's kick it off. Alphabetical order once again, by city, of course, or state in this instance. Arizona, the Arizona Cardinals. Your reason for optimism here for the Arizona Cardinals, you went with their defensive line. Feels a little bit like it's, a purchased mercenary line in some ways, but they also have some draft players in there. Walter Nolan's in this group now. They got Darius Robinson. They've got Josh Sweat. They've got Baron Browning. They've got Calais Campbell's back in the fold. They got a lot of big names now. And over the last 2 years, they have really leaned into giving that defensive head coach, Jonathan Gannon, basically all the toys that he could ever want to play with along that front seven. So it feels like you think that they have done enough to see some good production there this year.
It's possible that they've done more than enough, Trevor, and I think Jonathan Gannon wanted to make a statement this offseason. Obviously, they still have some things to fix in the secondary drafting. Will Johnson helps. There's some young kids back there, but you look at the depth on this defensive line, and then you pick up Calais Campbell, who led the league in run defense grade last year. Walter Nolan in the first round, who was second in the country behind Mason Graham in run defense grade. Dalvin Tomlinson's a reliable veteran. Josh Sweat's gotten at least 50 pressures 3 years in a row. You mentioned Darius Robinson getting healthy and more productive. You re-signed Baron Browning. There's 1,000,007 pieces all of a sudden on this Cardinals defensive line, and when you talk about getting into any front that they want, whether it be 4 or 5 or even 6 at times, if Gannon wants to start blitzing, he made a statement this offseason with what he wants this defense to look like. They want a heavy rotation of a lot of different guys with a lot of different skill sets on this defensive line, and you're not relying on any one guy like some other teams do to carry the load, right? Say the Bengals with a Trey Hendrickson, or, there's other teams that just rely on one guy to be the superstar. The Cowboys were like that with Micah Parsons last year. The Cardinals have talent, they have depth, and they're going to try to run this defense through this defensive line, and then everything's going to layer back into the back seven in coverage. But I think Jonathan Gannon really made the statement of where he wants to dominate, and that's in the trenches this season.
Man, and even the depth, right? Even the guys that they could go to after that. You got Xavier Thomas. You got B.J. Ojulari. You got Zaven Collins, Jordan Birch, L.J. Collier, Justin Jones. Like, okay, like some of those guys you go like, whatever, but they're just depth guys. But they're depth guys. I mentioned them after that first wave. That is a deep front that you mentioned. You could play 2 down linemen. You could play 3, 4, 5, 6. You can do whatever you want to do with that much depth that the Cardinals have. And so now it is kind of on Jonathan Gannon to orchestrate that game plan the way that he needs to. For the Atlanta Falcons, you went with Michael Penix Jr., their now second-year quarterback, who's that at the end of last season, what an incredible last 3 games that he had, especially that very last game of the season against the Carolina Panthers. 94.5 passing grade, 7 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. That looked like Washington Huskies version of what we saw Michael Penix when they were making their run all the way to the national championship. I'm with you 100% on this one. Shoot, I leaned into it so much that I had Michael Penix and Drake London as the number 10 quarterback wide receiver duo combination going into the 2025 NFL season. I think that they are going to be incredibly hard to stop. So I'm with you all the way on the reason for optimism being Michael Penix Jr., especially for how he ended that year last year.
Yeah, the future is now for the Atlanta Falcons, right? And you mentioned you saw those 3 starts that he made last year, 84 passing grade with 9 big-time throws. That second number was the second most in the NFL in those 3 weeks, and they just barely missed the postseason. And you do wonder last year if they would have gone to him sooner with the arm talent that he has. He just opened up the entire field. If maybe they would have won the division instead of falling just short. But you look at it this year, it's still a pretty open division. Obviously, the Bucs have been sitting on top for a while, but they're not that far off from being as good or if not better than the Buccaneers, right? So you look at Michael Penix getting a full season. If you did get a full season of even that 84 passing grade, that's a top 10 mark most years, right? So you're talking about a guy who can stretch the field deep. He can work it sideline to sideline. It just gives you a lot of arm talent and ability that Kirk Cousins didn't give them last year. And you talked about that rapport with Drake London. I think Drake London is going to be a superstar this year. I really do. 35% threat percentage when Michael Penix was the quarterback. I think those two are going to be one of the most fun quarterback receiver duos to watch in the league, like you mentioned. But a full year of Michael Penix, he already looks like an NFL quarterback. He knows what he needs to do. He's not the biggest mover. He's not going to improvise and do all of that, but he knows how to process from the pocket. As long as they protect him, I think he's going to have a good season.
Well, I don't know about not too far from the Buccaneers. Let's calm down a little bit. I don't know about that, but no, I think the NFC South is going to be a lot more competitive than it has been over the last couple of years. Specifically because when you mentioned that over the last 3 games of last season, Michael Penix Jr.'s 9 big-time throws was second in the NFL. Number 1. Did you see who it is? Do you know who it is? You know who I'm going to say?
I knew this. Hang on. Don't say it.
All right.
It's not. No, it's not Baker, is it?
Mm-hmm. No, it is not.
No.
It is.
Wait.
Okay. All right. I'm shot clocking you here. 5.
I'm gonna take it. I know this. I'm gonna be wrong on this.
NFC
I think it's.
South,
I think
3.
is it. Oh, it's Bryce Young, isn't it?
It is Bryce
because he
Young.
outdueled him. I was almost gonna say Justin Herbert, but yeah, it's Bryce Young with the hot stretch because he won that. You mentioned that game with 7 big time throws. Bryce Young beat Penix in that game, so that was a fun one.
Yeah. 10 big time throws in the last 3 games of the 2024 season.
All right, we'll get to the Panthers. We're getting to the Panthers and all that. Unless you're trying to skip ahead on us, we'll certainly. They're coming up here pretty soon. We'll get to them. Don't spoil it now.
We got to keep the order. We can't go straight to the Panthers. Order. It's the only thing that keeps us from the animals, as Winston would say in the John Wick series. Baltimore Ravens, elite rushing attack is what you have to lean into and look forward to. The optimism that the Baltimore Ravens have. I mean, honestly, the Baltimore Ravens are a Super Bowl caliber team. So there's a lot of reasons to believe in this team. They've got the MVP in Lamar Jackson, just one of the best players in the game. But you just went with the overall rushing attack here. Derrick Henry at 31 years old, 93.5 rushing grade last season. Won the award for PFF's best rusher, beating out Saquon Barkley. It's just an unbelievable 1-2 combo. It's one of the best that we've seen over the last 20 years, honestly.
I'm not sure that we've ever seen, as far as rushing, a better quarterback-running back combo than these two, right? And it was a theory heading into last season of, okay, this team's getting Derrick Henry now. What does he have left in the tank? We know Lamar Jackson's maybe the best running quarterback of all time, right? But to see it in action and to see what these two did together, Henry led the league in rushing grade and missed tackles force. Lamar Jackson, the first quarterback to ever have a season with a 90 passing grade and a 90 rushing grade in the same year. And, we question their offensive line and certain little things about this team, but the facts are the facts. They're going to be able to run the hell out of the football. Even without Henry, they were the number one rushing team every year, and then you add an all-time great like him in there, and obviously you've got some good complementary guys as well, right? Justice Hill in the passing game, Keaton Mitchell behind him, but the fact that they have Lamar and Henry is going to give them a chance to win every week. And Trevor, they were 11-0 when Derrick Henry ran for at least 90 yards last season. So when they do get this run game rolling, they're basically unstoppable, especially with the improvement from Lamar Jackson throwing from the pocket, getting into play action. Even the drop back game, he's been a lot better the last couple of years, and there's a reason he's already won 2 MVPs, and you could argue should have won a third one last year. But these two guys in the backfield made this offense almost unstoppable.
Yeah, and man, when you think about what their rushing attack can do for them, not only is it the success, not only is it the points, it's the control. It's the control that they get to have over every single game when both of these guys are rushing the way that they want to, even with just Derrick Henry rushing the way that they want him to rush. It's the volume, it's the points, it's those things, but it's also just the control over the game. By the way, I disrespecting Josh Allen winning MVP last year. I'm sorry. We gave MVP to Lamar Jackson, so I was thinking off the top of my head. I was like, we gave Offensive Player of the Year and MVP to Lamar Jackson, but didn't want to take anything away from Josh Allen winning his first there because he was also very deserving. He's been one of the best players in the NFL. So, Bills fans, don't come after me, especially when we give you a reason for optimism here. It's a good segue into the Buffalo Bills. That time the alphabet actually worked for us. You have a more talented defense. That was the exact quote there. A more talented defense there for the Buffalo Bills. Talk to me about the Bills having a better defense this season.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the pieces they've added, especially it starts on this defensive line, right? You're talking about Michael Hoyt, Joey Bosa, Larry Ogunjobi, Landon Jackson in the draft, TJ Sanders in the draft, Deion Walker in the draft. Clearly the first goal was to get more depth on this defensive line and have more rotational pieces around Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver, who are really the two guys who you're going to see play almost every single snap, right? I think when you look at this defense on the whole, 28th in PFF grade, 31st in coverage grade. That second part, they're trying to fix a little bit at cornerback, drafting Maxwell Hairston in the first round. But this is the idea. Look, I could always in this column put Josh Allen. He's always the reason you can win a Super Bowl. He's the reason for optimism. But they had to bridge the gap on this defense. And I think this offseason, they've done a nice job of it. Is it going to work? We'll find out come playoff time, right? This team is going to be in the postseason, probably deep into it in another big game against Kansas City or Baltimore or both or whoever. But you're talking about you can't win a Super Bowl with the 5th worst graded defense in the league, right?
Yeah.
And for them to add this much talent, especially on that defensive line, this is what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott had to go out and do. I think they've done it. We have to see it on the field now. A couple of guys need to bounce back, especially Joey Bosa. A bounce back from him would really help in a more part-time role, and then obviously the rookies have got to develop as they go, but they have more talent than last year because they were just not going to win a Super Bowl with the defense they put on the field last year.
Yeah, to me, it's what they can get out of these vets, right? I mean, like you bring in Joey Bosa, you sign Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, but also some like Shaq Thompson, for example, right? I mean, we talked about on last week's show, Matt Milano. What's Matt Milano going to be? Because if he's fully healthy, man, I think it changes things for Buffalo's defense. But, with him being a little bit older, with him missing some time, like, okay, does Shaq Thompson really have to play significant snaps for you? And if he does, like, can he be that player that you need him to be? He's a little bit older now as well, but you mentioned Maxwell Harrison. A couple of the rookies need to play well. TJ Sanders getting into the mix on that defensive line. So there's a lot of new names that you could feel pretty good about. And I agree with you. I think that's a reason for optimism is that you have new veterans and new rookies that are thrown into an existing lineup that you feel pretty good about. They were 12th in the NFL in EPA per play allowed, so certainly top half of the league, a lot better than what some of those run defense and coverage numbers said from a grades perspective. So I do think that they're right there, especially with those additions. And if the defense can just be a little bit better, you mentioned Josh Allen can make for a flamethrower offense every single week. The offensive line's still going to be great. If Keon Coleman really takes that next step and is that alpha wide receiver one for this team, man, watch out for the Buffalo Bills. Could genuinely be Super Bowl champions a year from now. Carolina Panthers, now we are getting to Carolina, and it's very topical from what we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, because the reason for optimism, you said, is Bryce Young. The way that he was able to play since coming back from being benched at the beginning of the season, I mean, Dalton, I don't know if I've ever watched a more night and day quarterback in a single season from what we saw from Bryce Young. I mean, he played so bad in the first 2 weeks. Benching him was sort of just an overall symbol of where they were, because you would have thought to yourself, there is no way they would bench this player. Why would they do that? They took him number 1 overall. You've got a new coaching staff in there anyways. But he looked that lost in the first 2 games of the season. They bench him. It felt like they didn't even really have a plan to put him back in the lineup. Andy Dalton ends up injuring his thumb in a car accident. He's fine, which is good. But it allows Bryce Young to have the door to be like, all right, well, Bryce, you got to get back in there. And he looks unbelievable. He looks like the best version of Bryce, the closest version to Alabama Bryce Young as we had seen yet from him in the league. And I think the numbers back that up. So I agree with you. The way that Bryce Young ended the season, really since the second half of the season, I think it was from week 10 on, was really that mark that we talk about from him. He looked great, and I genuinely agree with you that is the reason for optimism here.
And he was fearless. I think that's the biggest thing. The second half of last season, he was 6th in the league in passing grade and 2nd in big-time throws behind Joe Burrow. And you look at his ability to throw downfield and throw it accurately and fit it into tight windows. We didn't see him do that before. His first year and a half, it looked like he was scared to throw into those windows. And I get it. This team was last in the league in receiving grade last year. So then you look at Young's development being the catalyst for them taking Tetero and McMillan with the 8th overall pick. And now you're working that receiving core around him. We know they got to fix a lot on defense, and they bought a lot of defensive line pieces. They drafted some good pieces on defense as well in the D-line and in the secondary. But when you talk about Bryce Young's development, it's always about your quarterback. That's the centerpiece of your team. That's the foundation of your team. Everyone's going to ask, who's your quarterback and how well is he playing? Bryce Young, the second half of last year, looked like a franchise quarterback and a guy that suddenly Carolina wants to continue to build around through the rest of his rookie contract and see where that progress goes and then build the rest of the team around him.
For the Chicago Bears, I think that this one isn't obvious as well. You went with head coach Ben Johnson, and I agree. This has been the most sought-after coaching bachelor, if you will, over the last couple of off seasons. He's opted to return to the Detroit Lions over the last couple of years. Now he ends up going to the Chicago Bears. It's not just the fact that Ben Johnson is great, but man, it sort of came out after Matt Eberflus was fired and him and Shane Waldron were gone. It's like, yeah, this is actually what was going on behind the scenes. We're like, well, how is that even possible? Like, with the Caleb Williams stuff of him not having anybody to watch film with, and it's like, man, how is this even possible? And it just didn't feel like it was a good fit really anywhere within that coaching staff. And now you have a coach that, yes, he's a first-time head coach, and so we'll see how Ben Johnson handles those responsibilities, because we've said on this show, I've often said this, like, when you become a head coach, a lot of the time it's a lot less about what you are as a play caller. Now, there are still phenomenal play calling head coaches, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, Andy Reid. Like, there are still guys that are fantastic, but a lot of times when you become a head coach, it's about being a CEO. It's about delegating. It's about managing people and the rest of your coaching staff. And so you have to be good at that just as much as you are a good play caller. So we'll see if Ben Johnson can be that type of a head coach. But Dalton, I mean, basically anything's got to be better than what it was last year. And so even for that alone, the change alone, I have reason for optimism with a really good Chicago Bears roster. But even with that change comes a really good one in Ben Johnson now being under the headset.
Absolutely. You look for leadership, and in a new coach, you look at a vision, right? And we look at all the moves that the Bears have made this offseason. We talked about the offensive line moves and free agency, the new weapons that they got with Colston Loveland and Luther Burden in the draft. And all of it just speaks to Ben Johnson's vision. Even if we're just talking about the offense, the vision of what he wanted this to be, a great outside zone blocking offensive line, right? A stacked group of weapons that he can get in any personnel grouping with. And what he's done is isolated it to the point where, look, this offense is going to go as Caleb Williams goes as well as I develop him, just like it was with Jared Goff, right? And how insulated he was there with the best O-line in football and a stacked group of weapons. And they don't have the running backs in Chicago yet that they did in Detroit. But Ben Johnson has clearly figured out, okay, this is how I surround a quarterback. This is how I make him better. And now I just have to get him to play more fundamentally sound and play on time. All of this that we've talked about the entire offseason is all in the scope of Ben Johnson's vision for this offense and for this team. And it sure looks like, as long as Caleb Williams comes out and plays well, that it's going to work in Chicago this time.
Yeah, I've got some, how does that offensive line sort of gel together? What does the defensive line look like? Are they going to be impactful enough? Certainly the linebacker level wasn't great over the last couple of years with really just last year specifically with Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. So like there's things to think about that you have to improve. But man, I mean, just having that coaching staff, Ben Johnson, but also, Dennis Allen, that coaching staff is absolutely a reason for optimism and to think that Chicago can make the playoffs this upcoming season. For the Cincinnati Bengals, you went with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. I think this is the obvious one. Anytime that you have that trio, you feel like you could score 30, 40 every single game. And so you ended up having that trio there as your biggest reason for optimism for him.
Yeah, especially with all the tense negotiations with Trey Hendrickson. These three, it's pretty much all they have for optimism right now. And you look at these three players, Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, when they're healthy and on the field, they can beat anybody. I don't think there's any question about that, right? Burrow was second in the league in passing grade behind Lamar Jackson. Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown at receiver. T. Higgins with the 7th best receiving grade. You have this passing game with an elite quarterback and maybe the best pair of receivers in football. They got a chance to win games even despite their defense and despite the offensive line. And look, they ended the year on a 5-game winning streak, and their defense was the 6th highest graded defense in the league for those 5 weeks, right? So I think as long as, and they don't have to be the best defense in football. That's not by any means what they need to be. They really need to sign Trey Hendrickson and keep him because he's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But as long as you have a decent defense, these three guys you mentioned can win any game. They can score 30 points any given week. They can just carve up defenses anytime they want to, especially Burrow operating from the pocket quicker than maybe any other quarterback in the league right now. So I think it just comes down to it. Any week that they have Burrow, Chase, and Higgins all healthy, they can win any football game against anybody.
I would also shout out a point that you've made here on this program a couple of times this offseason. Their new defensive coordinator, Al Golden, I think leans much more into what is the strengths of this secondary, specifically at the safety level. Geno Stone did not play well last year. We looked at that, I believe, on last week's episode, and he really struggled. He went from an 85.7 coverage grade with Baltimore the year before to just a 52.3 coverage grade in Cincinnati and Lou Anarumo's defense last year. Now he gets to go back to that single high true free safety role because Al Golden played cover 1 or cover 3 about 75% of the time last year at Notre Dame, and we only got that formation just over 40% of the time last year in Cincinnati with Lou Anarumo. So I'll echo that point that you've made a couple of times this offseason as well, as I think that's also a reason for optimism, as I think the secondary is going to be playing a lot more to their strengths with that new structure there. For the Cleveland Browns, you went with Myles Garrett. I think there's three. That we could have gone with here. Myles Garrett is one of the biggest and most obvious ones. So I'll talk about who I think are the other two maybe reasons for optimism here for a team that might struggle quite a bit this upcoming
It's Shedeur Sanders, right?
No Shedeur Sanders is actually one of the
Oh, wow, you're not even messing with me. Okay.
No, I mean, he has to be, right? Because you look at how he played in Colorado over the last 2 years, like, whether he's the week 1 starter or not, he kind of has to be a reason for optimism, right? Because you clearly, I know you had him as QB1 in this past class. So even though I was a little bit lower on him, I thought he was more of, like a mid-day 3 type of a value quarterback. To get him in the 5th round, especially to the current quarterback situation that the Browns have, you are hoping that you get an absolute gem in Shedeur Sanders and that he's starting at some point and that he shows you starting caliber capabilities at the NFL level. So genuinely, like, no trolling, he is one of the other reasons of optimism if he can gain that starting role for them. But you didn't go with Sanders. You ended up going with Myles Garrett. I'll tell you who the other one was after you kind of explain why you went with Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, he's arguably the best defensive player in football, right? And anytime you just have number 95 out there, your front seven's going to be formidable. And you look at this team, they still led the league in run defense grade last year. I believe they were 3rd in pass rush grade as a team. And Myles Garrett, when he's on the field, he just changes everything. He makes everyone else around him better, and now they've got a top 5 pick at defensive tackle in Mason Graham as well. If there's anything that's going to allow the Browns to win games this season, it's going to be their front 7 like it usually is, because Myles Garrett is absolutely unblockable. Whether it's 2, 3, 4 guys blocking him, it doesn't matter. He's one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and he gives you a chance to, at least your defense, a chance to keep your team in a game while your offense is obviously trying to figure out the quarterback situation, the running back situation, basically everything on the other side of the ball. But this Browns defense, as long as Garrett stays healthy and he's Myles Garrett, they're going to be able to keep them in games.
So the only other one that I was going to bring to the table is obviously Kevin Stefanski, right? Multi-coach of the year type of a guy. If there's anybody that can squeeze the most out of a roster that seems sort of in flux right now, you would hope that it would be a coach of the year candidate in Kevin Stefanski. So he is the third one there. I think your only choices for the Cleveland Browns is the dominance of Myles Garrett, the head coaching acumen of Kevin Stefanski, and then can Shedeur Sanders kind of save things for you at some point. For the Dallas Cowboys, you went with a pass game bounce back. In 2023, Dak Prescott was playing so well that we considered him for our MVP that season. He didn't end up winning it, but it was a shout out for him and how well he was playing. In combination with that, CeeDee Lamb had an unbelievable year, had an elite receiving grade that season, and it looked like just one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 combination of quarterback wide receiver that we had in that 2023 season. 2024 was a different story. Dak Prescott was hurt, in and out of the lineup. CeeDee Lamb, even when he was out there, it felt like it was a little too force-fed to him. Defenses were really keying on that connection. There wasn't anybody else who was really a threat. And I think that they struggled overall. So the pass game bounce back, though, we've seen it when it's at its best. The Cowboys can really light up the scoreboard, and that was your reason for optimism here with this team.
Absolutely. I mean, Prescott, I know it's always controversial to defend the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, but he's a better player than he showed last year. 67.2 passing grade when he did play was the worst of his career, and then you had the injury in the second half that held him out. And then you mentioned it, just no second weapon to help CeeDee Lamb. This offense has always operated best when they have a vertical threat that opens up the space to allow CeeDee Lamb to work underneath. And you know what? I still think to this day, I think they're the winners right now of the George Pickens trade. I like this trade on their end. They can decide whether to extend him later, but he was one of 5 receivers in the NFL with a perfect 99.9 deep receiving grade. The threat that Pickens gives you one-on-one deep down the field is going to open things up for Lamb underneath, and I don't think you could pick 2 receivers that complement each other better than those two. So when you look at this passing game, as long as Prescott's protected and Tyler Booker goes in there and plays well and they figure out their left tackle situation, I think this passing game is going to be a lot better, and it's going to have to be because I do have serious questions about their run game.
What we don't have serious questions about is what the Denver Broncos are going to be on the defensive side of the football, because the only real question, and you do have a question in here when you say best defense in the NFL, a little Ron Burgundy, a little upward inflection there at the end of it, but they're in the conversation. I mean, they were a top 5, top 3 defense in the league in a lot of categories last year. They only got better from who they drafted and who they signed in free agency, and a lot of those big players that were big-time contributors for them and why they were good, they're still there on that defense. So a lot of continuity there. It's the same coaching staff. It's the same defensive coaching staff there for that team. The only question for the Broncos defense is, are they going to be a top 5, a top 3, or the number 1 defense in the NFL?
Yeah, and I think the questions come from the 2 players that they got from the 49ers, in Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, right? You're looking for bounce backs from both of them. Greenlaw hardly played last year because he tore his Achilles the Super Bowl before, and if he gets back to what he can do, and even Alex Singleton next to him at the linebacker level, those 2 guys are a lot better than the guys they were playing with last year, especially Greenlaw in coverage where the Broncos really struggled. And then Hufanga, I think, getting in the ideal role, I've talked about this before, is Brandon Jones as the free safety, Hufanga as the box safety, right? I think that's a more ideal role for him. And then getting Jahdae Barron in the first round of the draft to go across from Patrick Surtain in some sense, whether it's inside or outside or both, I think he can play that Trent McDuffie type of role where he can play a little bit of both. If you want him outside on early downs in your base defense, if you want him in the slot on later downs in obvious passing situations, whatever you want to do with him. So this team, they have enough talent to be the best defense in football. There's a couple of things that have to go right to get there, because last year Philadelphia was clearly the number 1 team on defense. It wasn't even close. They can catch up to Philadelphia, though, if all these moves work out right.
For the Detroit Lions, you went with Aiden Hutchinson. Just Aiden Hutchinson is the reason for optimism. We talk about, obviously, like how incredible he was last season before he got hurt. Detroit has just one of the best rosters in the NFL. Certainly have been very close to the Super Bowl over the last couple of years, but you focus in on Hutchinson as that reason for optimism. And according to all reports, he's going to be good to go, right? There's not going to be limitations. He's not going to be on this big pitch count during training camp. Like he's good to go. Now, obviously, they'll probably, ramp him up a little bit here, but it doesn't feel like there's any sort of, holding him back in any way, shape, or form, which is really good, at least for the initial news after such a major injury that he suffered last season. So talk to me about Hutchinson being the big reason for optimism here for Detroit.
Yeah, he's the guy before last season that I picked to win Defensive Player of the Year, and he was certainly going to do it had he stayed healthy, right? A 95 pass rush grade in the time he played last year. 45 pressures in 5 games, Trevor, and the most ridiculous number we all know, 38.3% pass rush win rate. If you're above 20, you're on an elite level. If you're around 25, you're on a Myles Garrett type of level. And he was at 38% through 5 games. And honestly, it didn't look like he was slowing down at all before the injury. So I think when you look at this Lions defense, it was all of the injuries, obviously, at all 3 levels. But the one that hurt him the most was the loss of their elite pass rusher, Aiden Hutchinson. They went from first in the first handful of weeks with Hutchinson in to 27th in pass rush grade as a team. And you could just tell they want to get home with 4. They just couldn't do it without Hutchinson. Getting him back this year changes the complexion of their entire defense. And even if he's not at the insane level that he was at last year, he's still an elite player. If he's a top 5 pass rusher for him, you're adding that guy to a team with Super Bowl aspirations. It's the biggest return of any injury, I think, in the NFL this season. And if he comes back anything close to what he was last year, the Lions are still Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, I would also shout out the back end of that defense as well. Like I know that they're losing Aaron Glenn as their defensive coordinator, and so you kind of got to think about that. But promoting from within to get that defensive coordinator spot there. Terrion Arnold, Bryant Branch, Kirby Joseph, DJ Reed, Amik Robertson, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., whatever he could be for this team as well. This is a group that was top 10 in EPA per play allowed in terms of EPA per pass allowed, I should say, and overall coverage defense. This is a really good unit, and I think that they could be one of the best secondaries in the NFL. So I also think that's a reason for optimism there. If you could pair that with Hutchinson coming back as a pass rusher, you're again talking about a phenomenal defense, certainly. With the Green Bay Packers, you went with a rookie, a guy who's coming in for the first time. We haven't even seen him play an NFL snap yet, and yet you are saying a reason for optimism here is their wide receiver from the first round this past draft in Matthew Golden. Why is Matthew Golden the choice here for the Green Bay Packers?
Well, I'll say this much. The Green Bay fans showed us they were excited about this at draft time, and honestly, if you're going to wait from 2002 all the way to 2025 to draft a wide receiver in the first round, you better be optimistic about it, and you better find a reason to be if you're not, right? So you're talking about a guy, look, 4.2 speed, 99.6 deep receiving grade at Texas last year, really found his form the second half of last year once Texas started using him more, and I think just for the compliment that he can be, that, Christian Watson has been when he's healthy, but he's not healthy enough, of the speed threat to take safeties off the top of the defense, right, and open everything else up underneath for Jordan Love to not try to force so many of those home run balls. So I do think there's a 2-layered element of this, of Golden being the deep threat himself, and then opening up windows for everybody else, for Romeo Doubs, for Jaden Reed, for Dontavian Wicks, for Tucker Kraft, right? The Packers have a lot of weapons, but last year they didn't have enough speed and enough space to work with. Matthew Golden gives them both of those things. Now it's just on Jordan Love to make the right decisions with the football throughout the season.
Yeah, I think that this is also the answer that I would go with, if not just saying, hey, I believe in Matt LaFleur a lot as a head coach. I mean, that could also be an obvious one there, but certainly Matthew Golden being on the team is reason for optimism. We looked at how sort of up in the air that wide receiver room was. I also think that just Josh Jacobs and how good and how consistent he is a big-time reason for optimism, because they're going to be having to figure things out in the passing game. Where do the targets go with the tight ends, with the wide receivers? Who's going to be able to stand out and really solidify that? I think the Packers are hoping that in the second half of the season, they have a really good feel for who deserves to get the most targets and when situationally on this team. The first half of the season might be a little bit of a learning curve. You might be going through a learning process there, but the constant within that first half of the season, you're hoping is Josh Jacobs. And so I think that he's stabilizing that offense is a big reason for optimism as well. But I agree, Matthew Golden's a big deal for this team. For the Houston Texans, you went with an elite pass defense. Man, this defense in general, I mean, you've got guys who can fly around on this team. Specifically, that secondary, if fully healthy, man, what a fun secondary that is with guys like Caleb Bullock and Jalen Petrie and CJ Gardner-Johnson, and certainly Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter as well at the cornerback positions. I mean, this is a fun secondary, and it could be very well one of the best in the NFL. I agree with you.
Absolutely, I think. And then you look at the pass rush up front with Will Anderson and with Danielle Hunter off the edge, and even Derek Barnett is a third guy that they managed to keep in free agency as well. I think this is, if you were asking me, Trevor, who are the 2 or 3 teams that you don't want to be in obvious passing situations against, I think the Houston Texans have to be there. I would not want to be in 3rd and 8 very often against the Texans because they can rush with 4 and they can get home with Anderson and Hunter. And you mentioned all the guys in that secondary: Stingley, Lassiter, Gardner Johnson, Petrie, Bullock. There's just too many guys that you don't want to be throwing deep downfield into the teeth of that defense. So I think if the Texans, if their run defense can be a little better and they can force those 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations more often, it's going to be very, very hard to throw on them once again.
Dude, especially if they're playing confident. Like, secondary play is all about playing with confidence. These dudes are dogs. I mean, the mentality of players like C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley, and even some of these younger guys like Jalen Smith. Yeah, like when I watched him, Elijah Hussey, when I saw him when he was at the East-West Shrine Bowl practices, I mean, like, these are dudes who are fearless. Jimmy Ward, Miles Bryant, the same way. So whether it's the starters, whether it's the early rotational guys, or whether it's the depth guys, the attitude and that dog meter, if you will, from this secondary is so incredibly high that if this group is playing confidently, there's no doubt about it. I think that they could be one of the best in the NFL. I agree with you. The Indianapolis Colts, offensive weaponry is your choice here for a reason for optimism. I think that they're still going to figure out, okay, like how many targets are we giving guys like Alec Pierce versus A.D. Mitchell, or how much are we getting Tyler Warren into the mix early in his rookie season. But I think this is an incredibly talented group, especially on paper. So I do agree with you that this is a big-time reason for optimism for this team, independent of what is going to happen at their quarterback position.
And that's right, is independent of the quarterback situation, whoever that may be, whoever it is, they've got a loaded group to work with. Look at all the names you just mentioned: Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, A.D. Mitchell, Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor. They got DJ Giddens, who I really like and could be their RB2 very soon as well in the 5th round. I just think and a good offensive line, right? Quentin Nelson, Bernard Ryman, Braden Smith, those guys up front. It's a very good offensive line. It's a very good receiving core. Jonathan Taylor wasn't, he's had low grades last year because he didn't break a ton of tackles, but still had a 1,400-yard rushing season. Then we can't forget about how good Jonathan Taylor is in the backfield. This team has got everything you could possibly want as a quarterback competing for a starting job, right? Just get me in there. And with Shane Steichen as the play caller, it's really not about getting a certain guy a certain number of targets with him. It's just throw to the open guy, run the RPOs the way we want you to, make the simple throws, get first downs, and let the athletes be the athletes, right? I think they've got a ton of guys who can do just that. I think Shane Steichen is the right play caller for a group like this, and now they just have to figure out the quarterback situation. We'll figure it out through training camp in the preseason, but whoever wins this job certainly should not feel shy about slinging it to all of these options that they have.
For the Jags, you went with Travis Hunter. So, all of the draft assets and everything that they gave up to go to number 2 overall to go get him. And just his presence, I think you have him listed wide receiver corner, and I would agree with you. I would also list him the same way, and just everything that he could be to that franchise. But he is the ultimate reason for optimism, in my opinion, because he was the best player in this draft. He's been one of the best players in college football over the last couple of years, certainly won the Heisman Trophy this past year as evidence to that. I agree with you. I think that Travis Hunter, even with Trevor Lawrence on the team as their quarterback, yeah, sure, the quarterback position is the most important. They think they got a great one in Trevor Lawrence, but what Travis Hunter could be to slingshot this team in the right direction, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's the biggest reason for optimism going into this season.
Yeah, and I think James Gladstone even said as much when he was talking about trading up for him and getting not just Travis Hunter the player, but Travis Hunter the person, and how driven he is to be great and possibly be great on both sides of the field, right? And you're talking about a guy who has wide receiver 1 potential and CB1 potential on defense. He's been practicing both. I know the focus has been more so on him as a receiver, but he's been practicing on both sides, picking his spot, picking his days of when he's going to go on defense as well. And I just think he is just the ultimate light, right? He's like the ultimate optimism guy when you talk about somebody who we've never seen anybody like him before. We've never seen somebody win a Heisman Trophy the way he did last year at Colorado, and that's what he was at Colorado. We've already seen this for 2 years. Him and Shedeur Sanders were the bright lights, and they've already both been mentioned on this show. But Hunter, what he could be as a wide receiver pair with Brian Thomas Jr., what he could be to fix a secondary that really struggled in coverage last year, what he could be across from Tyson Campbell at corner. There's endless possibilities with with Travis Hunter, and I think that's what makes you so optimistic about what the Jaguars can be in the next 2 to 3 years.
You went a little into the weeds with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm glad that you did, because the obvious reasons for optimism here with the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Chris Jones, Steve Spagnuolo, those are the obvious names that we talk about all the time. You wrote down Rashee Rice, though, and I like that, because now we get to have a little bit more of a different conversation and less of the obvious, like, okay, well, when you have the best quarterback in the world and one of the best head coaches of all time, one of the best defensive coordinators that we have seen over the last 2 decades, like, yeah, okay, obviously those are reasons for optimism there, but talk to me about why you went with Rashee Rice here for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a guy in his first 2 seasons, 86.1 receiving grade as a rookie, 85.5 in short work last year. Let's just face it, 2 Super Bowls ago, they don't win it without Rashee Rice. He became their number 1 wide receiver basically immediately after being drafted in the 2nd round out of SMU, right? Last year, you could see when he got hurt, when he suffered that knee injury, it just wasn't the same. The offense was not the same. He was becoming their biggest mismatch, especially with Travis Kelce starting to slow down a little bit. Xavier Worthy was working his way into the offense. Now, you look at what they have on this offense, a healthy Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy in year 2 and starting to figure out how to use him right. Hollywood Brown is healthy. Maybe you get a bounce back from Travis Kelce. This is going to be a dangerous passing game, and if Rice is healthy, to me, he's the best option there, and he proved it his first year plus that he was on the field before the injury last season. This is a team that's got a Super Bowl caliber passing game if Rashee Rice is healthy for the entire season.
Yeah, I just wrote an article recently that was sort of like talking about some questions that teams would need to think about maybe for the long term of 2026, and sort of it's going into this season and what it looks like for 2026. For the Chiefs, it was my question is sort of, does this need for speed strategy work for you at wide receiver for this team, right? Because it's not just Rashee Rice, it's Xavier Worthy, and then it's Hollywood Brown. Like, those are their top 3 receivers on this team. And when you've looked at the last couple of years, when we think speed, we think of like deep speed. And no team has seen more too high coverages than the Kansas City Chiefs over the last couple of years, because they basically said, we're not going to let Mahomes throw for 5,000 yards this season. We're going to make sure that it's in front of us, and we're going to make sure that those passes are short or intermediate at the deepest, maybe to 20 yards, but that's about it. Anything else that you want to get, you better put yourself in good position, you better be good against zone, and you better have a plan after the catch. And the Chiefs said, okay. They were number 3 in the NFL in total yards after the catch last season, and that is with Rashee Rice missing most of the year, who was a major YAC player for them the year prior. Does that need for speed with those 3 players, does it work into this underneath strategy for them? And is that really the best way to attack this? And I think that it could very well be, but it's just something to think about moving forward. And I think that Rashee Rice is a big part of that game plan. Halfway done, so we got 16 more teams that we're talking about, reasons for optimism for every single team in the NFL. But before we get to that, talking to all the parents out there, asking them a question of what their child's future success looks like for them. Maybe it's them getting to travel the world. Maybe it's them owning their own house, owning their own business. Whatever that is, you can help them achieve that right now with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but this kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, and it gives their investments so much more time to grow. It's not just about when they're older. When they're kids, you can use those funds. Let's say you've been saving up for a couple of years, and then you got things with sports or tutors or music classes or tuition, things like that. You could be able to use it then and get those benefits there. Or if maybe it's 10, 15 years down the road, it is helping them start their first business, travel the world, get their first car, their first house, whatever that looks like. The whole thing is online. It's very easy to manage. You can do that right from your phone. Starts you just $20. There's no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages, and funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees to it, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. For the Las Vegas Raiders, now a lot of new faces with the Raiders, right? Geno Smith, the quarterback, Ashton Genty at the running back spot, but also Pete Carroll at head coach, John Spytek steering the ship as the general manager there. Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator. You went with offensive stability as the reason for optimism. So expound upon that. Let me hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly could have gone with Pete Carroll, because if you open a dictionary and look up the word optimism, Pete Carroll's picture is just in it. So I mean, that's a pretty simple one too. But when you look at the combination of first of all, Chip Kelly as a terrific play caller who just won a national championship at Ohio State as the offensive coordinator, but we went into last year with the Raiders going, look, who the hell is playing quarterback and who the hell is playing running back, right? And it ended up that was a problem because they were second. They had the second worst passing grade in the league, and they had the worst rushing grade in the league. Actually, I think they had the worst rushing grade of any team in the last 4 years. So they just could not find any sort of stability in the passing game or in the run game. Didn't matter. Now we know exactly who's filling those two spots, and that's Geno Smith, who's been a top 10 quarterback in the league over the last 3 years with Seattle, and Ashton Jeanty, who's one of the greatest college running backs that we've ever seen, right? So I think when you just look at the dynamic of this offense now, there's still some things to fix on the back seven of this defense, but Geno Smith, Ashton Jeanty, Brock Bowers, obviously the tight end, Jacoby Myers. Has been really good reports lately on Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh out there at wide receiver. So this offense could get really fun really quick, but I think the fact that they have stability at quarterback and running back, and they might have some semblance of balance and production to their offense with Chip Kelly calling the plays, I think this offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. They just got to gel. It might take them a few weeks to get the chemistry going, but I think they might be in a lot of shootouts with the way the back seven of their defense looks, but Geno and Jeanty and their backfield is worlds different than what they had last year.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're going to spend some time figuring it out, especially at wide receiver, right? They know that Brock Bowers is the guy, but hey, who's stepping up around those other wide receiver spots? But man, just having Geno Smith, I think, is huge for this team. You look at him, and his 85.8 passing grade over the last 2 years, it's sixth in the NFL. Like, Geno Smith has been a legit starter over the last 2 years. I'm surprised that Seattle moved on from him the way that they did, and I'm not surprised at all that with Pete Carroll back in the league and now has a head coach again, this was one of his first calls to get this quarterback on his team, because he knows exactly what he's capable of, exactly what he could do, and I'm excited for that part of it. I think Geno is the biggest reason for optimism, in my opinion. Los Angeles Chargers, you went with the young offensive stars here. So who are those young offensive stars there for the Chargers, and what gets you excited about those?
I mean, you have plenty of them, because you think about even for as long as Justin Herbert's been in the league, he's still only 27 years old for the entirety of this season. But then you look at the two guys they drafted last year, and the right tackle, Joe Alt, who's already a top 20 to 25 tackle in the league last year, probably going to ascend to higher levels this year. Lad McConkey was a top 15 receiver in the league last year. And then you look at what they added in this year's draft with the first couple of picks. Talking about Amarion Hampton, who's more talented than any running back that they had last year and was second over the last 2 years in college football in yards after contact behind Ashton Jeanty. This was a team that very quietly was in the bottom 6 or 8 teams in rushing grade last year. So Hampton should fix that. You get another big talented receiver in Trey Harris. Heard a lot of good things about the tight end, Oronde Gadsden, coming out of OTAs and minicamp so far. So you look at the youth that this Charger team has on this offense, and so many guys in their early to mid-20s that can come together the next couple of years under Jim Harbaugh, and he can build a championship contender. There's still some ancillary things that they have to fill out on this team, but you look at the young core of offensive stars that they have, this is a very dangerous team, and they're going to be for several seasons.
How do you not love what the Chargers are doing, man? I'm not a Chargers fan, but it's just this team, it's so much fun to watch them build. And really, from like the moment that they got Jim Harbaugh, I think that everybody was just like, yep, it's sort of just a matter of time. When is the winning window going to be open? And what does the rest of the league look like when they really hit the gas on that winning window? I think those are the only questions there. It's not a matter of if, it's when there for the Los Angeles Chargers. And so I think another year taking a step forward is going to be huge for this team. And I'm also excited for the young guys that they drafted and just the plan that they have moving forward. I think this is going to be a really good football team, especially a year or 2 years from now. The Los Angeles Rams, lethal passing attack is what you said here. So Cooper Kupp, no longer there, but they added Devontae Adams. And they were looking to upgrade at tight end as well. They brought in Terrence Ferguson. Obviously, they were able to retain Matthew Stafford. If Alaric Jackson can work through these blood clots and get out there and start, I think this offensive line is going to be really good for them as well. Obviously, Sean McVay is the play caller and the head coach, the offensive mind there with this team. I agree with you. This is a big-time reason for optimism for me. I got another one that I'll shout out, but I do agree with you that this is a reason to be very excited about the Rams this season.
Yeah, Stafford, when he's kept clean, is still a top 8 passer in the league in a clean pocket. This was the highest grade graded group of wide receivers in the NFL last year, and now they've upgraded on Cooper Kupp with Devontae Adams, like you mentioned. You get Terrence Ferguson in there. You get a full season healthy of Tyler Higbee, so you can get some 2 tight end sets going. Maybe a bounce back from Kyron Williams, who kind of struggled, especially with fumbles last year. This is really a lethal passing attack when it comes to Matthew Stafford still being able to sling the ball all over the place. The question is, and the one caveat you just mentioned, Alaric Jackson with the blood clot issue, 3rd worst pass blocking grade in the league last year. If they can improve upon that at all and they get Jackson back in reasonably timely fashion, then you're talking about an offense that's ready to win a Super Bowl. But it's going to start with that pass protection, then go right from Stafford to, again, the highest graded group of wide receivers from last season.
How about this defensive line? Yep. As well, right? I mean, like, if you just look at the defensive tackles and the edge rushers, it's the youth of these guys. Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse, right? Like, there's even behind him, like Brennan Jackson. Like, it's such a young defensive line with the Rams, and yet they were 11th in pass rush grade, and they were 7th in run defense grade. This is a unit that's only getting older. They're only getting better. And I say that it's not like older, like they're not getting worse. They're getting better. They're maturing. They're getting to their peak. And then you throw in that they added Poona Ford as well. So this defense, you already love what these young guys were able to bring to the table. But another huge reason for optimism is what this young group showed last year. They were already a top 10 defensive line in the NFL, despite being, we're almost all of them under the age of 25, and yet I think they're only going to get better this year. So that defensive line is a big reason for optimism in Los Angeles as well. For the Miami Dolphins, we've talked about how we're a little bit skeptical about what this season could be for the Miami Dolphins. It's a big-time make-or-break year for basically everybody in that organization. You went with young defensive line talent as a reason to be optimistic about the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of if on this defensive line, and this is going to be the core of this defense when you talk about Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips trying to get healthy this season. But even you look at what they got last year in Chop Robinson, I think he was the one really good rookie last year, Trev, that we just never really talked about all that much. It has 78.7 pass rush grade and 56 pressures as a rookie. Both of those led the team, and I know when they initially drafted him, it was expected that, okay, Chubb and Phillips are going to be healthy and Robinson is going to rotate in and get some work, get his feet wet, but he came in right away and was their best pass rusher, and I think we can't discount the fact that now, if all those guys are healthy, you got a really good pass rush trio, kind of like you have with the New York Giants, who we've talked about so much, and then this year, they bolstered even further on the inside. Yeah, they lost Calais Campbell, but you still have Zach Sealer in there, and now you've got Kenneth Grant, big 340-pound monster in there, who's an excellent run stopper. So if there's anything that can drive this Miami defense to success, it's their defensive line. They need Chubb and Phillips healthy, but I think what you have, especially in Grant this year, is the run stopper, and Robinson, what he showed us as a pass rusher. Again, we didn't talk about it much, but he was really darn good last year, and he's going to be one of the better pass rushers in the league this year.
Yeah, I think that I'll also shout out, I mean, like, let's just be honest, right? I think that the Dolphins' offense struggled last year, but the guys who made this one of the highest scoring and unstoppable offenses over the previous 2 seasons in 2022 and 2023, they're still there. It's Mike McDaniel, it's Tua Tagovailoa, and it's Tyreek Hill specifically. You throw in Jalen Waddle. Obviously, he was an elite receiver in 2023. He took a step back because everybody kind of took a step back on that offense. But Tyreek Hill, I mean, if you're worried about him like getting a little bit older and not having, as much speed left in the tank, what did he just run, like a 10-1-5 100-meter dash or something absolutely stupid like last week? So it's the guy still got the speed. You don't have to doubt that. And I think if this team is fully healthy, this is still one of the most potent and unstoppable offenses that we have in the NFL, especially when you consider the fact that Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith were great last year. And so if you go, okay, those guys are still going to be better, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going to bounce back closer to what they were in 2022 and 2023. If Tua is fully healthy, you have Mike McDaniel. Like, that's the reason for optimism. The offensive pieces are still there. Now, the offensive line's obviously got to block the way that they need to, but I'll shout that out as well. For the Vikings, this is music to Vikings fans' ears because it seems like this is the most talked about quarterback that I have seen this offseason, and that is J.J. McCarthy. And you're moving on from Sam Darnold, who had a phenomenal season last year. But, man, Kevin O'Connell is just, I think, given Vikings fans plenty of reason to believe that he can make it work with any quarterback, especially the guy that they went up and got and drafted in the first round a year ago, over a year, just a little over a year ago. So he misses all of last season due to injury, but you have him as the reason for optimism here for the Minnesota Vikings.
Well, you know what? Look, Vikings fans are going to have to be optimistic about McCarthy because they really have no other choice, right? The Vikings flirted with several other options this offseason, but they're committed to McCarthy as their guy. And look, I don't think we can sit here and expect him to be the best quarterback in the league or anything like that, coming off of the knee injury, not playing last year, and basically this being his rookie year. But I think he's fully capable of going in and doing what any other quarterback has done under Kevin O'Connell, including Sam Darnold last year. Go in, do the job, make the reads, make the right throw. It's that simple. And McCarthy, that's what he always did under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. There weren't a whole lot of games where he went out there and threw for 350, 400 yards, right? That's not his style. He's going to run the offense. He's a great play-action passer. He's operated under center before. That's not going to be an issue in Minnesota either. So I think he's adjusted to a pro-style offense even during his days at Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. He just has to go out there and execute, right? And Trev, you tell me also, there seems to be some controversy lately about McCarthy not having a strong arm, and I don't understand that at all. Just throwing it out there. I think he's got a pretty darn good arm. So I think it's more so that he has to work on the touch and maybe some layering of some throws. But there's been a lot of talk about, he doesn't have. I'm like, what am I missing here that there's some lack of miles per hour on McCarthy's arm? Because I don't see that one bit. I think he's got a really darn good arm, actually.
Yeah, I absolutely would not say that like McCarthy has a weak arm. I don't remember noting that at all during his time when he was at Michigan. Now, I think that some people, when they do scouting and they do their evaluations of quarterbacks, sometimes they can have a point of view that might be like a little bit skewed. Like, is it Josh Allen's arm? No.
But nobody's
is it Patrick Mahomes' arm? No. But basically, like, nobody is. And I think the important thing when you're scouting and you're evaluating players, more importantly than like elite traits, in my opinion, because if you have those, obviously that they're very evident. And if you could stand head and shoulders above NFL level competition, that's a major difference maker. So of course you want to make note of that. But to me, it's much more important to note, do you have adequate ability? Like really, like that's what it is. If you have if JJ McCarthy has the 10 to 15th strongest arm in the NFL, that's fine. Like that's not you don't have to write that down as like, okay, now this is an issue. Now we have arm strength worries. Like again, is it in like tier 1? I wouldn't say that it's in tier 1, but as long as it is adequate, or maybe like, just above, between adequate and good, whatever you want to call it, adequate and great, whatever your scales are, that's totally fine. So that's always sort of like where I thought McCarthy was. So I agree with you. I don't see these issues of arm strength with him. I think the arm strength is totally fine, and I'm just excited to see him play this season. I'm especially excited to see him play behind what could be the best offensive line in the NFL. Another reason for optimism that I would bring to the table, having Christian Darrisaw, having Brian O'Neill, having Will Fries and Ryan Kelly now, and now you draft Donovan Jackson. Like, this could genuinely be the best offensive line in the NFL. All due respect to the Philadelphia Eagles, and who have been just obviously unbelievable, and they're fantastic. But the Vikings could be right there in that top 3 conversation. The New England Patriots, you said defense is the reason for optimism here. I would just simply go with Mike Vrabel. Like, Mike Vrabel is my reason for optimism for the New England Patriots, but you went a little bit more detailed than you went into the defense specifically.
Yeah, I think, and look, all the talk is going to be about Drake May's development and their offensive line and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Williams and everything else around Drake May. But when you look at this defense, so look, there's not that many defenses in the NFL that have really a threat at all 3 layers. Look at what you're talking about. This defensive line, especially in the inside with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore, if he's healthy. You added Robert Spillane at linebacker to go with Jelani Tavai, right? Then you look at this secondary, Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis on the outside with a decent group of safeties, Marcus Jones in the slot. There's threats at all 3 levels of this defense, and I think the best thing you can do for an offense is have a defense that at least lowers the expectations and lowers the necessity of what they need to do, right? Drake May doesn't have to go out there and score 30 points a week to win games for this team. I think if you get in that 21 to 24 range, their defense can absolutely keep them in games, especially I look at that interior pass rush potentially with Williams and Barmore after Williams led the league in pass rush grade last year. I think this defense is the more dangerous part of this Patriots team right now, and they're going to give their offense at least a chance to win and a chance to make mistakes with Drake May and the young offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, we've already sort of given them a round of applause for what they've been able to do. This was the worst roster on paper in the NFL last season, and it is drastically different, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So certainly there's a lot of reasons for optimism with the New England Patriots, their quarterback, their head coach, just the new defensive additions, everything that they have done there. And it's certainly you highlighting the defense is one of them. For the New Orleans Saints, you say hope on the offensive line is a reason for optimism after drafting Kelvin Banks Jr. To now play left tackle for them. They get to move Talise Fuanga to the right side. Now Trevor Penning gets to be kicked inside. We know how good Eric McCoy is when he is fully healthy. If Cesar Ruiz is the weak link for you at the guard spot, I mean, I think that you're doing pretty dang good. So I agree with you. I think that this is a strong part of their team, maybe the strongest part of their team now, as long as those young guys continue to play well.
Yeah, there will be debates about the second-round pick, Tyler Shuck, and everything going on with their quarterback situation this year and beyond, but I think what they did with drafting Kelvin Banks Jr. with the 9th pick was the right thing to do, right? He was arguably college football's best tackle last year. You move Fuaga back to the right side, where that's where he played at Oregon State, right? Maybe Trevor Penning finds something at guard. You've got McCoy and Ruiz on the inside. It goes from being the worst pass-blocking team in the league last year to this year. You go, okay, I can at least see the vision. I can at least see Kellen Moore's blueprint for what he's going to want up front here. Not going to be perfect necessarily because it's a young group, especially at tackle, but you're talking about, okay, I know what I'm building for the next 2 or 3 years here, and that's what you're looking at with the Saints long term. They have to get better in the trenches over the next 2 or 3 years, no matter who their quarterback is, or they won't succeed. The defensive line will catch up behind it. They're going to need to work on that in the next couple off seasons as well. But if they could solidify this offensive line, especially with this Kelvin Banks pick at left tackle, then you really start moving into the future here with New Orleans.
For the New York Giants, I'm going to need you to get rid of the question mark that you have at the end of this statement. You have elite pass rush? No. Elite pass rush. If Kayvon Thibodeau is your worst pass rusher, that's an elite pass rush group. You got Dexter Lawrence, you have Brian Burns, now you added Abdul Carter at number 3 overall this past draft. And again, if you're throwing Kayvon Thibodeau into that mix, if Thibodeau is your worst pass rusher, you have a damn good defensive line and pass rush group there for you. And so we'll see if he'll be on the team long term. Do you think about, if the Giant season isn't going so well, do you move him at the deadline, whatever, you keeping him until next offseason? Because he has this season, and then he even has next year the club option, but obviously that becomes very advantageous if you're trying to trade him. You're probably going to do it before the deadline because the team's going to give you more because they've got more contract flexibility and a longer leash on sort of when they would have to make a decision on Thibodeau as well. So all those things go into it, but as it stands right now, on paper, elite pass rush group there with the New York Giants.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of defensive coordinators are going to be jealous of Shane Bowen and the possibilities of, the NASCAR package you could have with Burns, Thibodeau, Carter, and Lawrence. Like you mentioned, got to get Dexter Lawrence back healthy, but he should be fine as long as he is. And then you talk about Abdul Carter, the Micah Parsons-like ability, right, to fly all over the place as a former linebacker, to blitz in any gap against any matchup, to stun all over the place. And he's a freak athlete who can win one-on-one anytime he wants to, right? I think that's the one. For as much as we've got great veterans, right, especially with Brian Burns, and Dexter Lawrence has been one of the best players in football for a long time, I'm so excited to see just what they do with Abdul Carter, how he moves him around, and how much we really do get the next Micah Parsons out of him, right? Number 11 from Penn State, former linebacker, all of that. The versatility and the ability that he gives you opens up, I think, endless possibilities schematically for the pass rush, too.
For your New York Jets, you went with the 2022 draft class. That was your answer here. And just to give people a reminder, the 2022 draft class for them was Sauce Gardner at number 4, Garrett Wilson at number 10, Jermaine Johnson at number 26 in the first round, and then it was Breece Hall in the second round at number 36 there. And then the depth guys, you had Jeremy Ruckert, Max Mitchell, and Michael Clemens. So that 2022 draft class, they're going to have to make some big decisions contractually with a lot of those guys, but they still remain the cornerstone pieces of this team going into the season.
Yeah, so I mean, you look at obviously Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner are stars, and I think they're about to get massive extensions. I can't remember. I want to say they picked up the 5th-year option on Jermaine Johnson. I think that was recent news, but I can't remember if they did. And then Breece Hall this year, he's been a part of trade rumors that Aaron Glenn has squashed, but I think you look at this team, and we looked at it 3 years ago like this. This is now the foundation of this team, right? This is the draft class that has to bring this team out of the doldrums, right? And I think if there was one other bit of optimism you could go with here, I think it is the offensive line. It's something we've talked about a lot with Fashanu, Simpson, Tittman, Vera Tucker, and Membu. That could also be the answer here. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to especially Wilson and Gardner as the superstars that came out of that 2022 draft class, former top 10 picks. They're both about to make a boatload of money. They got to build. That's the core they have to build around. And obviously, they're still looking for a long-term answer at quarterback. But this Jet team is going to go as this 2022 draft class does, and then you could argue as their offensive line does as well.
I would have picked the offensive line, but certainly, the cornerstone guys, I agree with you. Those are the reasons for optimism, I think, on the roster, not just this upcoming season, but long-term. But, man, building that offensive line, certainly by taking Armand Membu, you really committed to saying, like, this is going to be one of the strengths of our team. And so I think that is certainly a reason for optimism, not just for 2025, but also, who's the long-term quarterback on this team? What's the offensive identity going to look like? You want the questions of the offensive line to already be answered, and I think the Jets have done that. For the Philadelphia Eagles, you went with a roster raring to repeat here as Super Bowl champions. And it's kind of crazy that after losing Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Brandon Graham, CJ Gardner-Johnson, like all of these guys are no longer on the team. Darius Slay, like these guys are no longer on the roster. And yet this is probably top to bottom still the most talented roster in the NFL. So I agree with you. It's hard to, some of these teams, it was hard to find reasons for optimism. It's hard to pick what the reason for optimism is here for the Philadelphia Eagles, because I agree with you. I think it's just basically their whole situation.
It's just the entire operation. And you mentioned a handful of guys, but those guys and Mekhi Becton, that's pretty much all that's gone. Trev, if you look at the top 25 guys in snaps played for the Eagles last season, 20 of them are coming back. So you've got basically the same team. I don't think they lost anybody backbreaking, right? They got to figure out the right guard spot. They've got a deep room of defensive tackles to replace Milton Williams. But then look at what you added in the draft with guys like Jahad Campbell and Andrew Makuba. I mean, it's just silly the amount of talent that they have and the amount that they keep recycling every single year with Howie Roseman, and we know he gets the draft steals every single year. They extended Zach Bond, which is big time. I mean, they're just so well set up to repeat this year, and obviously you have to go out and execute and do it and worry about, okay, the hangover after a long season and winning a championship. But this team, talent-wise, I still think they're the best roster in football heading into next season, even with those pieces that they lost.
All right, I know this one hurt you. The Pittsburgh Steelers. The reason for optimism, you wrote down quarterback Aaron Rodgers. I know this one hurts you to type out, so I am dying to know how we got to this conclusion here for Aaron Rodgers being the pick with the Pittsburgh Steelers. As
someone who was optimistic 2 years ago about Aaron Rodgers and lost that 4 snaps into a regular season, it's a little bit weird, but it's another one though where, look, I could have put T.J. Watt in the defensive line. It's still going to be a good defense. You could just put Mike Tomlin, knowing you're never ever going to have a losing season with Mike Tomlin. But I think at the end of the day, now that you have Aaron Rodgers, you don't really have a choice, right? You better feel good about it, or, well, I don't know what you're going to do as a Steeler fan this year, right? So I think, is it a major upgrade over Russell Wilson? Personally, I don't necessarily think it is, but still, even at his age, 76.3 passing grade last year, 1.8% turnover-worthy play rate, which was 5th best in the NFL, so we know he's not going to beat himself. To me, the questions are more about their offensive line, especially their tackle situation, and once again, like last year, the lack of depth at receiver. But if they're trying to change things up, if they're trying to get more efficient instead of relying so much on the deep ball and just get first downs and make the right throw, then Aaron Rodgers is your guy. I don't know that he can take him to the Super Bowl, but certainly with a functional quarterback, this team with their defense can get back to the postseason. And look, it seems like very often that's just been the goal for the Steelers lately, and then figure out what happens in the playoffs later. But I think Aaron Rodgers, it certainly makes you more optimistic than Mason Rudolph and Will Howard the way we thought it might be a few weeks ago. So I think that's just kind of where you're at, is if you're not optimistic on Aaron Rodgers, you don't really have any other choice here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think that you're using Aaron Rodgers as the piece here to be optimistic beyond what they already have. But just as a whole on this team, you are correct in what you said at the beginning. The defensive line is genuinely what you have to look forward to and why you should be optimistic, because you are hoping that this defensive line is so good that you're holding teams to under 20 points, under 25 points almost every single game this season, because I think that's what you're going to need. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon in the draft this year, but then you throw in Nick Herbig, Alex Highsmith as well. This was the number one pass rush defense in the NFL, 90.6 grade as a team. They also led the NFL in pass rush win percentage at a 57.9%. This is one of the best defensive lines and one of the best fronts in football, and that's obviously the big reason to be optimistic. But Aaron Rodgers, yes, if you're hoping that they could capitalize on that defensive line, they're going to have to do it through him. The San Francisco 49ers, you put return to health. We talked about this on last week's episode of the show. If Christian McCaffrey gets back to being fully healthy, if Brandon Ayuk gets back to being fully healthy, if some of those guys on the defensive side get back to being fully healthy, this is still a very talented roster and could make some noise. But there's a lot of big ifs with these guys getting back to form here for the 49ers. So return to health as the reason for optimism here for them. Talk to me about it.
I think health is the biggest X factor for this team right now. They have issues on defense, especially in their run defense, and they tried to figure that out in the draft, especially with all those defensive linemen they took and Robert Saleh coming back as their DC. But I think you look at this team offensively. Trent Williams comes back, even at his age, still an elite player. Christian McCaffrey healthy is an elite player. Brandon Ayuk healthy is an elite player. Jawan Jennings emerging. Ricky Pearsall, a full season of Ricky Pearsall. George Kittle's the best tight end in football now, right? You look at this offense, and if they're healthy, they're 100%, and Brock Purdy just got all his money. They should make the playoffs with this offense alone. They really should, as long as all of those guys are healthy. And it's big questions and big names. I think especially McCaffrey is the biggest question when you're talking about both Achilles being injured last year, and he didn't look good when he was out there, right? So I think that's the biggest question with their offense. Defensively, they have some flaws. They're going to have some flaws. They're young at certain spots, especially on the D-line around Bosa. But I think if you have this offense at 100%, they absolutely should at least be in the postseason race, and if not in.
For the Seattle Seahawks, I like this one. You went with their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, who we liked a lot of what he did with the New Orleans Saints last year. It just wasn't a great situation overall, certainly up front, and then what they were dealing with at the quarterback position. But now he is in a new home in Seattle. I think it's a lot more stable in a lot of those situations, but he's still got his work cut out for him with an offensive line that's still figuring it out. I know they drafted Grey Zabel, but they got to play better on the interior offensive line. Christian Haynes got to play better. Abe Lucas, hopefully you get a fully healthy season from him. We know how good Charles Cross can be, but if that offensive line holds up, man, you got to like some of the weapons that they've got to throw to and what he could do as the offensive play caller there in Seattle. So I like this pick with Clint Kubiak here.
Yeah, honestly, I think you can see it kind of sort of the way I talked about Ben Johnson in Chicago. You can see the vision with Kubiak, right? And it's just like Gary Kubiak, his dad. It used to be, we want outside zone run, we want bootleg off of it, we want to take deep shots down the field. Sam Darnold did that very well in Minnesota last year, and he worked with Kubiak as his quarterbacks coach in San Francisco in 2023. All the same system, right? I love the running back room on this team. I know you and I were talking about it behind the scenes earlier last week, Trevor, is that Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Damian Martinez in the 7th round, which I think is a great value. That's a terrific running back room when you're talking about Clint Kubiak, a coach who wants to run the football. You mentioned getting Grey Zabel on the offensive line in the 1st round. I think Christian Haynes is a great fit for this offense. It's the same offense he ran at UConn in college. Didn't quite get that last year under Ryan Grubb. And then the receivers. Look, Marquez Valdez-Scantling played good football last year in New Orleans. Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of the best slot receivers in the league. Cooper Kupp comes in with similar experience in a similar system. So, look, it's going to take time, I think, especially on the offensive line, and they really need Abraham Lucas at right tackle to be healthy as well. But I think there is at least a vision here with Clint Kubiak and what he wants this offense to be. I'm not worried about the defense as much. They got a lot of talent under Mike McDonald there, but I think Kubiak is going to really start to gel this thing together as we get into the middle and later parts of this season.
For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you went with 2 words that for a long time I never thought that I would hear associated with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers growing up a Buccaneers fan. It was always about defense, right? Even after the Super Bowl defensive years, it felt like if the Buccaneers were ever going to win a game, it was barely, and it was probably because of their defense. You had some years there with Jameis Winston where the offense was pretty potent, but the defense was bad, and the team wasn't very good anyways. You went with dynamic offense. I think words that for most of their franchise existence have not really been associated with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I do agree with you. When you look at the quarterback, the offensive play caller, the offensive line, and the weapons that Baker Mayfield has at his disposal, this feels like it could be one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL.
I think it will be. I mean, look, Trev, last year they were top 10 in passing grade. They were top 10 in rushing grade. They were top 10 in receiving grade. I think they were number 2 in pass blocking grade. The only one they weren't is they were number 18 in run blocking grade, but okay, you have one flaw, whatever. I mean, it's just you look at this offense and the number of options with Baker Mayfield playing the way that he played last year. Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Ibuka now. Even Trey Palmer as your 5th receiver, certainly not a bad guy to have, right? Cade Otton at tight end, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Sean Tucker, and a really good offensive line and a young offensive line at that. There's just endless possibilities for this offense, and they keep cycling through offensive coordinators, but every new one that comes in must feel really darn good about the talent that's out there, especially with Mike Evans putting up 1,000 yards like it's just his job. I mean, he just keeps doing it every single year, even when he's missing games and he's hurt and all that. But I think the center of it all is Mayfield playing better with an extremely good supporting cast around him. And you're right, this should be one of the more high-flying offenses in the league again this year.
And there's reason, even with the offensive coordinator change, Josh Grizzard, who's the offensive coordinator right now, there's reason to be optimistic about that as well, because not only was he the pass game coordinator for the Buccaneers last year, so he's familiar with these guys and what they're capable of. I mentioned how good that Miami Dolphins passing attack was in 2022 and 2023. Well, he was the offensive quality control coach for those two offenses in Miami. So he's been a part of some potent offenses over the last couple of years, and now he gets to be the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay.
And you're going to lose him to another head. You're going to lose him to a head coaching job next offseason too. You're going to lose him again too.
Well, I mean, that's just the Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, he likes meeting new people. He's a social butterfly. He likes making friends. He's trying to meet a lot of people. He's a fun-loving guy. So he's just he's trying to meet new people every single year. That's all he's trying to do. Tennessee Titans, you went with Cam Ward as their reason for optimism, their number 1 overall pick. I agree with you. I think that the rest of this roster, not that there aren't good things, the interior defensive line with Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat, I think that should be fun for them. But ultimately, I think that they're really trying to figure out a lot of identities throughout this roster. The one that they're hoping that they already have solidified in stone is what Cam Ward is for them at quarterback. So I agree. At least it is something for them to believe in at that quarterback position.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're picking number 1 overall and you take a new quarterback, that's your reason for optimism, right? You were the worst team in football last year. In the next 4 years, you're hitching your wagon to this guy, and he was the highest graded quarterback in college last year. He certainly earned that number 1 overall selection with the way that he played at Miami, and obviously working his way up from zero-star recruit to Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami. So it's not like this guy has told him he has had people tell him he can't do it before, right? Starting out as a 0-star recruit in the FCS. So now going to what was the worst team in football last year, this has to be your biggest ray of hope is Cam Ward as your quarterback and then building everything around him.
Last one is the Washington Commanders. You didn't just go with Jaden Daniels, which you could have just said Jaden Daniels and we would have been fine with it, talked for 60 seconds and moved on. But you went with more help for Jaden Daniels here. Now, this is a team that was 1 win away from making the Super Bowl, and now they have more help for that quarterback that was very dynamic for them and has that Super Bowl ceiling like we saw last year.
Yeah, I think if you're arguing last year, now obviously stats are stats and the numbers are what's often going to decide an MVP race. But if you really look at a player who was most valuable compared to his supporting cast and the rest of his team, you could really argue it was Jaden Daniels. So I like that Washington went out this offseason and they got pieces that are going to support him, right? Laramie Tunsil, one of the best pass blockers in the league that really sets up the rest of the offensive line for success. Deebo Samuel, I think, still has plenty left in the tank, especially when it comes to yards after catch. You got Josh Connerly, possibly to play right tackle. Jalen Lane later in the draft as a speed threat and after the catch threat with the ball in his hands. Even Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt as more running back depth. So I think when you look at Washington and what they have on their offense now around Jaden Daniels, they've supported him well. We still have questions on defense, but certainly it's a matter of Jaden Daniels now in DC being the center of the universe and everything else being built around him.
Yep, it's fun times to be a Washington Commander fans. There's a lot of really great things to talk about, like we've talked about for a couple of these other teams. There we go. Those are 32 reasons for optimism for all 32 teams in the NFL. Well done, Dalton. For next week, we'll let you be as pessimistic as possible and and you can tell everybody why their team's going to suck. But appreciate everybody watching and listening. If you want to see these stats for yourself, the ones we rattled off throughout this show, you can go get a PFF Plus subscription over at PFF.com. It'll power every single winning decision, whether it's with betting winning decisions, fantasy football winning decisions, or even if you want to put on the general manager hat and we're thinking about the NFL draft, or using the mock draft simulator, you're powering winning decisions for your own football franchise. You can do that with a PFF Plus sub. That's it for us on the live side of things this week, but of course we will have some content for you throughout the week and throughout the offseason, so make sure you like this video and then subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss any of that great content. I'm Trevor Sikkema, that's Dalton Wasserman, once again saying thank you so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We will see you guys next week.